Hello, and welcome back to The Biz. My name is Jim Henry, president of Atlas Wealth Advisors, and this is the video series for financial advisors and others in the wealth management industry. And now we're going to tackle what I think is going to be a really fun series of topics on firm transitions. In my over 30 years in the industry, I think I've learned a few things, developed a few opinions that I'm sure I'll share, but really want to dive into some different pieces and parts about firm transitions. Should you do one? What should you think about? Where are your priorities? How big of a pain is it really? And I think there'll be a lot of different interesting things that we'll get into. It's certainly something that's talked about quite a bit. So I'm not even sure where I stole this from, frankly, but someone once said, it's a third-party recruiter, maybe you'll watch this and feel free to take credit for it. But when it comes to these transitions, there's the fit, the feel, and the financials. And I really like that because I think those are sort of the three areas that you have to think about. And over time, we'll break down all three of those and I'll give you some thoughts on all of them. But the first thing I want to focus on is, should you make a transition? And of course, that's a very personal thing. No one can answer that question but yourself. But I do have some thoughts on it. And every year, depending on the year, maybe 5-10% of advisors switch firms, and there's a lot of reasons why they do that. I think, and if you've been watching these videos, this is not going to come as a surprise. When I talk to advisors and they're thinking about a transition, they're talking to me about, hey, what would life be like at Atlas Wealth? I don't know, things are good, what have you. The first question I always ask, once I get to know them, especially a little bit, and this is, once again, won't be a surprise, is what are you trying to accomplish? What's the big picture goal? What's the vision for your practice? What do you want to set out to do? What is the most fulfilling part of what you do on a day-to-day basis? Where do you see this thing going? And then maybe ultimately, where do you see this practice if you ever step away? Do you want to step away? So I like to start there because I feel like that's the biggest way to answer the question of, should you transition? Because the question is if you're going wherever you're going, is the situation you're in now going to lead you there? Or is there, even if it can lead you there, is there more efficient, is there a better practice set up, a better firm, a better situation for you to get there more easily, or just maybe more fulfilling, in a more fulfilling way? And I think that's where I like to start. And I would encourage you, if you're still watching this video after a minute or whatever, it's probably kind of something you maybe have thought about, which is, where am I going? And are there impediments to that growth in my current situation? And what could those be? Well, maybe you're in an employee model and there's certain things that you can't do, whether it's client ownership of the relationship, whether it's the ability to use different tools and resources or different investment products. Maybe it's limiting to you as you can actually, that you don't own the enterprise itself, and you're not going to be able to pass on the clients to who you want to and the way you want to. There could be a lot of different pieces of that, but that's where I would always start is, we've been talking about this through the series of videos, is what do you want your practice to look like? How do we need to make changes in order to get there? Well, one of those changes could be, you got to change firms. And that's okay. It can seem daunting. It can seem like a lot. We'll get into all of those things, but that's probably the main reason. Of course, there's other advisors that change firms because, they're just in a bad situation. And I hope that's not you. I hope all advisors are in a good situation, but that also doesn't mean that you shouldn't change. I think a lot of times advisors are comfortable. You might be making more money than you ever thought you would make. You like the people you work with. No one's really giving you a hard time. Of course, there's little things, but those probably aren't enough to add up to saying, hey, I got to get out of this firm. But if you are at a place that's going to be harder for you to get to where you ultimately want to be, those to me sometimes are the best reasons to transition. Because it's not like you're fleeing a bad environment, which once again, if you're in one, you may just have to leave for that reason alone. But assuming that you're not, assuming that you're in a good environment and everything is generally okay and you're generally comfortable, the reason why I would encourage you to think about it is, as you're doing all that planning, if there are roadblocks that you can get out of the way, I would encourage you to think about that. And that's kind of what we're going to set out to think about. If you are in that boat, if you're, hey, I do need to think about this, what sort of things should you consider? And that's what we'll be taking on here over the next series of videos. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Always appreciate the feedback. Please, I think I'm supposed to say like, follow, share, whatever. But appreciate the interactions we have had, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.